to me like a WeWork style operation with all sorts of really interesting technology groups here in this building. So as a bit of background, we collectively are a subset of the Defense Innovation Board members, and we work for free as special government employees for the DoD to try to help drive innovation, drive change, so forth and so on. The way our structure works is we have, as part of being a FACA committee, we have public meetings. This is a public meeting, which we are very happy to do, and it's literally an official meeting of our group to talk about things, so you can watch the way we make our recommendations and help us shape what we want to do. Austin has a fantastic innovation community. This is not a new fact for you all. And, I want to make sure I thank the hosts at the Capital Factory for this obvious thing. You know who I am. Kurt, where's Kurt? Kurt is nowadays the Executive Vice President of Corporate Strategy and has run many of the products and services that you use from Microsoft. Michael McQuaid was a big-time aerospace executive and is now Vice President for Research at Carnegie Mellon University. Richard Murray is a professor at Caltech of Control and Dynamical Systems and Bioengineering. And Mark Sarangelo is now an entrepreneur in residence at the University of Colorado and was head of space systems at Sierra Nevada Corporation. So he's the person who understands the space and space activities best among our group. On our line, we have a number of other people. We have Eric Lander, who's the president of the Broad Institute and one of the foremost biologists in the country. Jen Palka, who is the founder and executive director of Code for America and the former deputy CTO of the U.S. government. Dr. Daniela Roos, who is the director of computer science and AI and a professor at MIT and a foremost AI expert. Neil deGrasse Tyson, I think is well known to this audience, an astrophysicist at the American Museum of Natural History and in New York City, and an astrophysicist by training as well. Missy Cummings is the director of Humans and Autonomy Lab and a professor of engineering at Duke Universities, and was also a fighter pilot in the Navy before she turned to university work. Marnie Levine, who's the VP of Global Partnerships and Business Development at Facebook and a former Chief Operating Officer of Instagram. And Danny Hillis, who's a computer theorist and co-founder of Applied Inventions and inventor of many of the things that we use today. So the way this meeting works is we're going to have a set of subcommittee discussions. We want to talk about two recommendations, a report on something called Biology and Data Digitization with something called the Joint Pathology Center, something you've been working on for a long time. And then the Congress has mandated an assessment of software-related talent programs and a response to congressional tasking through the NDAA. When we started, our objective was to have no reports at all because we figured nobody would read them. And the government has recently been mandating that we actually produce reports so that they can read them, which I guess is a good sign. So we're going to go through those with you. We're going to talk about workforce behavior and culture. This has been an area that's been a high priority for us for a while, and we're going to discuss a recommendation of the appointment of a new digital engineering recruitment and management officer, which is again part of the NDAA. And if you're not familiar with the NDAA, most of you are. It's the legislation that's passed every year that authorizes the Defense Department and the defense activities of the nation, and we are subject to that law, obviously. We'll give a report on how we're doing implementing some of the DIB, and then we're going to go to public comment. Colleen?
That sounds great. Thank you, Eric. I think first we'll start off. We have a representative from Army Futures Command here who's just going to give some brief remarks.
Good afternoon, everybody. Whoa, tall person. I'm good. I can stand on my toes. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Sue Goodyear. I'm General Murray's executive deputy. And so on behalf of General Murray, on behalf of Army Futures Command, and on behalf of the city of Austin, we want to welcome you. This is a really good innovation ecosystem here. That's one of the reasons why Army Futures Command is here. And I think this audience and everyone online and everybody out there would like to welcome you and want to look forward to taking advantage of what you're going to talk about and then take advantage of the public forum. So on behalf of General Murray, I'd like to welcome you all here and thank you.
Great. I'm going to do some FACA throat clearing language up front, and then we'll get on with the show here. So, welcome to everyone here in Austin, the Capital Factory, for hosting us. My name is Colleen Laughlin, and I am the Executive Director and Designated Federal Official for the Defense Innovation Board. If you have not done so already, please go ahead and silence your electronic devices. Today's meeting is being recorded and live streamed to allow members of the public to attend today's meeting virtually. I want to do a quick shout out to the Defense Media Activity for providing your expert services and support today, so thank you. And welcome to all of our in-person and virtual attendees. The board will now convene its public session. As we begin this meeting, allow me to share a few procedural remarks. As Eric noted, the board is a discretionary, independent advisory board operated under the Federal Advisory Committee Act and the Government in Sunshine Act. Today's meeting was announced in the Federal Register notice posted on February 17th, 2020. The public was invited to submit written comments for the board members to consider. 14 comments were received in advance of today's meeting and will be posted online with the minutes of this meeting. There have been no significant changes to the meeting's agenda as posted in the Federal Register notice. Depending on time constraints, there may be an opportunity for members of the public attending here today to provide verbal comments to the board at the end of the meeting. Just a quick reminder, when you do your public comments, the board is not able to respond, but we of course welcome and would love to hear all your remarks. All of our papers for today's meeting can be found on the DIBS website, which is innovation.defense.gov. We encourage you to follow along. You can follow us on our Twitter handle @InnovationBoard as another way to follow the conversation. And with that, we will go ahead and kick off the meeting.
Yeah, do you want me to say a few things about where I think we are?
Yes, I think wonderful.
We've had a series of meetings with Secretary Esper, who is a very impressive public servant, and he continues to emphasize AI, talent management, and then reducing the foreign influence on the U.S. tech sector as themes that we should be focused on. We work very closely with Secretary Griffin, and he's focused us on biotechnology, commercial space, and trying to strengthen our ties to the national security innovation base. Secretary Lord is very, very focused with us on the software study and the SWAP study. This is a good forum to talk about that. And she's pushing for very bold reforms on acquisition. She's also doing a very interesting initiative around trusted capital to try to sort of streamline the relationship between the DoD and startups that are startups and more mature companies that are building technologies that the DoD needs. We're very, very proud to be a small component of the Joint AI Center that's run through the OSD-CIO, and we're beyond excited that the DoD announced the AI ethical principles, which we heavily participated in a week ago. If you haven't seen them, please read them. I think they're going to be my opinion, you guys can say you want to do it. I think they're going to be the index that all the other countries are now going to judge. I think we really, as a nation, made a strong proponent. So, in any case, General Shanahan will be here next week as part of the conference. So, there's other things going on. The FY21 budget increases federal research by 6%, including increases specifically for AI. We have, I'm the chairman of something called the National Security Commission on AI. We released an interim report in November. These folks work very closely with me to help make that success. I won't summarize it, but you can read it. It's been very well received on a bipartisan basis. We're going to hear some recommendations from some new topics that you'll hear that were initially introduced in Georgetown in our last meeting. And I guess I'd say to my colleagues, thank you guys for coming. It's just fantastic to be here. So, Colleen, how do you want to do this? You want to...
So I think right now we'll jump right into the S&T update,
Okay.
Starting off with Dr. McQuaid there.
Okay, thank you, and thanks again for everybody for being here. One of our committees in the Defense Innovation Board is the S&T Subcommittee. My colleague Richard Murray and I co-chair that, and we're actually going to split the duties here for two subjects. I'm going to lead a discussion with the board on some recommendations we're making on the Joint Pathology Center repository, enhancements to the digitization of that, and then Richard's going to talk about the DIB's assessment on the progress that the department is making relative to software development and software acquisition, testing, and management plans. So both of those on the agenda for today. So let me jump in on the Joint Pathology Center. And before I do that, I want to recognize two people in the audience. It's always good to have the people who have the task of implementing whatever it is that you recommend. So Colonel Joel Mansour is here with us, who's the director of the Joint Pathology Center, and Dr. Frank Rentis, who's the director of R&D for JPC. The gentlemen are both right here. You can wave your hands. Thank you very much. On the phone is Eric Lander, and I am counting on Eric jumping in at any moment when I either misspeak or don't speak enough. So Eric, thanks in advance for that. So our first recommendation today,
here.
Thank you, is a project that has significant impact for the global community as well as for the Department of Defense. It's focused on a very large volume of medical data that we have and a way to better understand and treat infectious diseases, cancers, and other places where large-scale data analysis can provide value to the public health community. I guess I don't want to be the first person, but I'll simply say the word coronavirus and then move on. So, so next slide, please. So we jump into specific recommendations. There's some things that's important to keep in context. So when we say medical data, what are we talking about at JPC? We're talking about biopsies, so tissue samples taken from patients with certain types of cancer or disease. Those samples want to be collected and associated, paired with medical records of the patients who gave those tissue samples for the medical data to be useful. Large volumes of data from discrete disease and cancers are sought but rarely available. And I'll show you some numbers in a moment about the amazing value of this repository. There are lots of barriers to accumulating and accessing a meaningful amount of data. Generally, there are few centralized resources of this kind of data. And major organizations typically dispose of the samples of these kind of data after a time that's either required by volume limitations, by legal or statutory limitations, et cetera. If we have access to that data, the medical community is better able to identify and understand current and future disease. It enables the global community to better respond to future global health crises. And it promotes a better sense of health and well-being, both in the DoD and in the general population. So we see this as an amazingly valuable resource, and then coupled with artificial intelligence, machine learning, things that the DIB has talked about for a very long time, only serves to amplify the value of that repository. So there are specific benefits for DoD, not just for the global health community. Number one, improving the service members' health and readiness, providing a resource to establish and deepen partnerships with the private sector, the academic sector, or quite honestly with peer adversaries. Provide the massive data sets that allow us to explore how AI and ML can really provide value in healthcare. It's a subject that is obviously catalytic for all of us. And ultimately lowering the cost of healthcare for the DoD, which is billions of dollars in the budget. Next slide. So there's the challenge. How do we improve healthcare? And the main topic for the discussion then is the repository at the DoD's Joint Pathology Center. JPC is organized as part of the Defense Health Agency. It's overseen by the Office of the Undersecretary for Personnel and Readiness. And it holds the largest repository of disease and cancer-related data in the world. So just to give you scale, there are 55 million plus glass pathology slides. There are 31 million paraffin-embedded tissue blocks. There are over 500,000 wet tissue samples, data that stretches back over 100 years. So if you think about the value of the data that we ingest into data analytic studies and into machine learning studies, this is an amazing resource that's available to us. It also, as I said, holds tremendous value for the department's digital modernization. So just the pure action of how do we deal with data sets this large? How do we extract value from our algorithmic capabilities? But of course, it's not hard. I'm sorry, it's not easy. Sorry, it is hard. It's not hard. It's not hard at all. Glass slides, paraffin blocks, 55 million. They're hard to share. They're hard to analyze. And most importantly of all, they are degrading over time. So for this reason, we are recommending a set of recommendations for the JPC to rapidly scan the full repository into digital fashion, and we have a series of recommendations on how we proceed to do that. I'm going to pause and just give Eric a chance to jump in. Eric, you want to provide any more background here?
Well, I'll just say a moment or two here. I had the pleasure and the honor to tour the facility that the JPC maintains, and it is a marvel. It is a vast warehouse with just stacks and stacks and stacks of shelves with both slides and pathology blocks that can be cut. Had a chance to look at how this operation is organized, and it is just a national treasure. Who thought to save all of this for more than a century should get a really big medal, because it's not something you could ever create today. It required a lot of foresight to do that. Michael has already described many of the reasons why this is important, and I just want to add one more. This Defense Innovation Board has talked about the importance of ML and AI as a strategic capability for the DoD. Many of the problems to which that's going to be applied are highly classified problems with highly classified data. I'm excited about the opportunity that there are a set of data which, while they involve patient confidentiality, properly done, can be a magnet for the DoD to work together with the tech companies, the startup companies, the academic sector, because I think it's a great way to improve your game to have the best data set in town, the best data set in the country, that will truly be a magnet for the development of new approaches in machine learning. So both for all of the health reasons and cost reasons, and it's an amazing asset, and it's advancing ML, I also think it'll build a special kind of relationship and position the DoD in a very constructive way relative to this whole ML community, and that's a value too. So carry on, but anybody who gets a chance to take a tour of it, you'll see why I was so impressed.
Can I try to understand, this is who is opposed to this brilliant idea, Michael and Eric? I mean, like, this benefits humanity, it benefits the military. What are the issues?
The issues relate to, do we have the technology? Do we have the capability to do this at scale and at volume? Okay. There's a minor issue of money, but it's a minor issue. So I would just say Eric Lander made this comment before, but I'll get to repeat it. Think about this repository and think about Indiana Jones. So that's the mental picture you should have of this vast warehouse full of samples. So the first three recommendations relate to the pilots. I keep referencing back to the standard way the Defense Innovation Board operates. Get out there, try something, and improve it as you go. So our first recommendation is to execute a pilot on the slide scanning itself. So the Secretary of Defense should direct the launching of a pilot to scan an initial batch of slides within 12 months. And the goal here is to establish the tools, the methods, the processes, the analyses, to determine how to scale up beyond the first set of slides. So the goal here that we have laid out in our recommendation is to scan something between 1 million and 2 million slides, to do that over the first 12 months, to estimate at an estimated cost of something in the $10 to $15 million range, and at the end of 12 months be in a position to double the volume in a second 12-month period at reduced cost with an upgraded set of tools and capabilities. So that's recommendation number one.
Michael, sure. I think it's also that we're going to do a sampling from the different periods and a sampling of the different types, so that this batch is going to represent, does it make sense, how far back does it make sense to go, and what's the quality of the slides in those early periods as well.
Right, thank you. And again, the whole idea here is you do a pilot to find out what it is that is going to deliver maximum value and can allow you to set the parameters for the ongoing work.
Usually in these data extraction strategies, the more recent data is much more useful than the 100 years old data. Do you have any reason to believe that that's not true?
Eric?
Well, the one reason why the old data is useful is there are conditions and diseases we don't have today. So as a general rule, what Eric Schmidt said is exactly right. But, there's the 1918 flu. There's many things. So I think there will be a set of medical problems that can only be addressed through this archive, and it's worth exploring what issues we'll encounter there.
The other thing I would say, and go back to Mark's comment, is part of this first pilot needs to be to determine which slides are both valuable and deteriorating most rapidly that may allow you to prioritize how you'd move forward.
Yeah, and I would also add that there are some diseases that make a comeback very late after were thought to have gone away. We're seeing some of that these days. So having some of that older data, even if it's not perfect, it might help us if we combat certain areas like the plague and other things which have reappeared in the world.
So we have two then ancillary recommendations to go along with this, also to be accomplished during this first 12-month pilot. One is to launch a parallel effort to build on and improve the linkage of slides to medical records. There's quite a wide array of the quality of the medical records, as Eric mentioned, the newer ones better than the older ones, how you access the connection between slides and medical records. That all needs to be piloted over the first 12 months. To connect the samples specifically to the records and specifically to things like additional medical visits, et cetera, the additional information that can go along with the slides. So that's the second recommendation. And the third is to initiate a pilot to allow some enhancements, molecular annotations to the slides, to the physical slides and tissue blocks, to see if there is even more value that can be obtained from the slides. So these are things like immunohistochemistry and in situ hybridization of the slides ahead of the scanning process. And so given that I just said those words, Eric can explain what they mean.
Sure. So the idea is when you make a slide, you've just stained it with some kind of a dye and you see a picture. But underlying that picture is biological material, like 20,000 different proteins distributed in the different cells and 20,000 different RNAs, types of RNA that are distributed. And it's possible now to reveal those by different kinds of hybridization methods. And even a few years ago, you'd do one at a time, but now there are ways to do 100 at a time, and for reading out gene expression, even thousands at a time. And we're beginning to see machine learning make it possible to take a subset of images that have been enriched and annotated in this way and build tools that'll let you carry that over to many, many more slides. So I think this recommendation, while it's modest in scale, is to make sure that the JPC is connected to the cutting edge of this work, because I think it will add great value. So that's what's going on. Is the picture has lots more, the slide has lots more information than we've been able to see until the past couple of years.
And Eric, this is Mark. Isn't there also the opportunity to help inform the collection of new data, new slides, by trying to determine how best to do that from this process of doing the sampling?
Yes, because of course the military is continuing to collect slides and blocks, and I think engaging in a project like this will very much inform, indeed, the whole scanning process, but also the molecular annotation process, I think will inform how this gets done in the years ahead.
Right, so slight modifications might produce much better data as we go forward.
Danny, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to add one thing to what Eric said, which is this is a pilot. I think it should be recorded as a pilot in two different senses. It's both a pilot for doing the entire repository, but also this pattern of the DoD having had the foresight to collect sample sets and associated records has actually been repeated in other places within the DoD. So there are other repositories too. And so if we can successfully have show the advantages of the results of this pilot, there's other places within DoD that these same kinds of things that could be applied to other kinds of sample sets and other kinds of data sets.
Very good. Thanks, Danny. Okay, so those are the three pilots, or three elements of the first year's pilot. And then the second set of recommendations relate to what happens next. So we are clearly recommending that this entire repository be scanned. Presumably after the first set of pilots, we will have determined whether there is the value that we think is there, et cetera. But then what are the additional recommendations? One is that you have to work a process improvement plan to be able to digitize the entire repository at the most cost-effective scale. So that means probably something, maybe the target is below $2 a slide, maybe it's a whole lot smaller than that to be able to get to the scope that we're talking about here. It's to fully develop the clear medical records linkage strategy and the data strategy that goes along with it. So we are talking about exabytes of data, and you can't do this for the full repository without understanding where, when, how, and what you're going to do with the data. So improving the slide scanning by targeting specific components, by understanding if there are new scanning technologies that are coming along, and maybe even reimagining the whole process that is in the pilot program to something that develops over time. We need a clear data strategy, as I mentioned before, to make it easy and productive to use the data and to make it accessible for not only AI and ML, but other forms of data analysis. And we are suggesting that the JPC needs to work directly with the Defense Digital Service on that. We need to worry about de-identifying patient data while still maintaining medical records linkages. We need to continue to look at this issue we've just been talking about enhancing the tissue slides and the tissue blocks. And there's an issue here that a holy grail amongst a whole bunch of other ones is that what we learn in the pilot from this additional molecular annotation becomes a training mechanism so that for the machine learning system, so that we don't actually have to do that on all the subsequent slides. So to be determined whether that can work or not. So that's the next recommendation. The fifth recommendation then relates to developing a partnership plan. So we're going to have all this data. How do we make maximum use of it? Either partners who assist in the process, so that's robotic experts, experts in pathology, experts in annotation, data storage, et cetera. So that needs to be completed soon. That needs to be completed within the first sort of 90 days after launching the process. We need to build the partnerships across the research environment, the commercial environment, across government sectors. To Danny's point, understanding how what we learn here may be more relevant for other repositories in the government. The JPC should reach out to organizations like Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center, who has experience in conducting similar exercises on other samples. They have a repository which is roughly half this size, and they're scanning at roughly 1 million slides per year. So there's some learning that can happen there. And we need to seek information and background from people who have been involved in very large digitization efforts in the past. So things like the Human Genome Project, and other forms of data collection efforts that have been underway for large-scale data. And then the ultimate goal is to make a fully digitized, accessible repository available within the next 5 to 10 years after completion of the pilot project. All physical glass slides and tissue sample blocks should then be in digital format. They should be associated with secure personal health information and exist in a data lake that is owned by the DoD, is protected, as this kind of data should be protected, but is available to people who can do the analysis and derive both DoD and community value. So the scale, as we said before at the very beginning, is 55 million slides. And time is going by. Time is going by as these slides deteriorate, and time is going by as we are not accessing the value from this repository. So those are the 6 recommendations. I'm going to turn the floor back over to Eric for additional comments, and then I'll turn it over to the group for more discussion. So, Eric?
No, you did a great job on that, and so I think I have nothing more to add to that. Thank you.
Comments?
I think it'd be useful to talk about how this relates to the VA and the VA administration. Eric, do you have any comment to that?
Sorry, I can't hear the question.
How does this project, if it goes to its ultimate conclusion and is adopted fully, how does it relate to the work being done at the VA, the Veterans Administration?
Well, I think the methodologies here are very general. I think the specific repository will have a lot of very specific problems it's going to have to solve for this amazing resource. So I want to separate out the value of the DoD and VA being involved in this kind of research and this kind of medical improvement, which I think will be general across all healthcare for veterans and for active duty and other Defense Department personnel. And then I think this resource, quite honestly, is going to need a lot of detailed focus to make sure that these fragile things are dealt with. So I'll put them in those two buckets.
Other questions?
Yeah, I had a couple questions, or more comments than questions. The first, I mean, we're in this hub of innovation. I think we should really stress the opportunity for the commercial sector to play a role here. I know we talked about it for the sake of consultation. I think the paper does a great job, and actually I support the recommendations wholeheartedly. It does a great job of talking about some of the pilots that are being done in Sloan Kettering you mentioned. I think we can even think about whether there's a way to outsource under the right guidance a ton of it. The other thing is there was, I think, the discussion around having all the data open, again, getting to the innovation community, the ability to, as long as you protect the privacy, the ability to make this a data resource that others can do research on, can build AI models on. I think that requires us to think very deeply about how much of this is open to the public for innovation.
So I'm concerned that when we get into this, we'll decide that we're not going to do all 55 million slides. We're going to do a subset for all sorts of costs and the usual problems, as you described. It's really hard. Can you imagine in the first phase the highest value targets and pick those as a priority? You know, you mentioned the 1918 flu as an example. In the notes, there are other examples of strange diseases that I've never heard of. Can we get a team to say, this is the most fruitful area to start, or is that part of the plan already?
I think that's part of the plan. I'll have Eric comment in just a moment, but that's clearly part of the plan, is the definition of the pilot. The definition, not just the pilot, but what comes after the pilot, has to include what's the prioritization of how you would go after them. So, Eric, I know you've spent time thinking about this from a prioritization point of view. I know there's one issue, which is sort of which ones might be most valuable and are most in danger of sort of falling apart, but there are other disease-related or clinical-related reasons. So, Eric, any other comments?
There are definitely reasons why you would prioritize, but let me also speak to the value of taking a chunk of this and trying to work through. The slides reside in sets of boxes, and much like if you were trying to scan a library at a university, one could make the case that perhaps prioritizing which books to scan, if it takes a lot of work to find each of those things and cherry pick it, might not actually be the best solution if you can drive down the cost. So I think there are two things to go in parallel. One, prioritized by medical importance and representation. And the other is, when I walked around the facility, I didn't see anything that, you know, there was a law of physics said couldn't be made pretty cheap. So I think one of our recommendations here is to ask, could this be done, you know, well under sub-dollar costs, in which case maybe the scanning the whole thing works. So I want to see both tracks go forward.
The amount of time and energy and cost it would take to try to put some qualitative methods on this entire 55 million would probably be better used just scanning the entire set.
I see your point. Yeah, understood.
Other comments?
Yeah, I think that horse might win.
Yeah. Anybody else on the phone with comments?
So this is Daniela. I would like to make just a few comments about how the latest advancements in dealing with data at scale and considering data governance and data sharing strategies can contribute and help this project along. So first, we have significant advancements in database systems that are coupled with policy awareness. And this is leading to new models for systems that can help govern data at scale and enable engagements with policymakers about what are the most effective, most appropriate approaches. Second, we have new advances on privacy-preserving, trustworthy machine learning that can potentially meet global legal requirements and that can provide explanation and bias assessment in how they're trained, and this can be utilized to great benefit for this project. And thirdly, I think it's important to consider data flow across different systems because data portability has clear benefits, but also significant impact on privacy.
I think the other thing related to that last question, I think there's a lot of data architecture and software architecture issues here. The whole notion of the amount of data that exists in these 80 million plus slides means you're not actually going to be able to do a lot of transfer of the data from one place to the other. So you've got to think about what's your platform look like so that you can bring compute to the actual data lake, as opposed to privacy reasons too. You're not going to want to download a bunch of this data.
Yeah, I agree. And I have to say, given all the work we've done on AI and machine learning, this to me, if I can step aside from the clinical value, just the sheer value of the Department of Defense having this data source and being able to learn what it means to deal with data scale of this scale is, that in and of itself is extremely valuable.
We've previously made the point that the DoD generates an enormous amount of data that it never actually uses, right? Yeah. I mean, like, there's an enormous amount of data in every operation that they do, and this is just one example.
So let's use one.
Yeah, but it sounds like a lot of data, and Eric, you know this better than anyone. 55 million images on the scale of what is created every day in terms of images is not as significant as it sounds.
Yeah, but for the DoD it is.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, Mr. Chair, if you're ready,
Yeah,
why don't we go ahead and do a vote?
Yes, okay.
Great. And I think what I'll do is I'll go through the dial-ins first and then let you guys raise hand. So, Missy?
Yes, I'm here.
Great. Do you concur with the recommendations?
I concur.
Great. Danny?
I concur.
Dr. Lander?
As a matter of fact, I concur too.
Great.
Yeah, you better.
Marnie?
I concur.
Great. Jen?
Strongly concur.
Daniela?
I concur.
Fantastic. And do we have Neil on the line also?
Yes, I am. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yes, I double concur. Does that count as 2 votes?
I can't do that for you, Neil. Excellent.
Okay.
And then show of hands here on the stage. Great. So we'll go ahead and approve that recommendation.
So it appears to be universally.
And before we move on, can I just express my enormous admiration to the JPC staff? Since I got to tour on behalf of the DIB and then host a meeting with the JPC and others, I just think they're doing an amazing job. And in all of these recommendations of saying they should be doing more, this is very supportive, and none of this would be possible without all of what they're doing already. So thank you.
Thanks. And I'll just close this by also recognizing Skylar Moore, who's part of the Defense Innovation Board staff, who was the lead on the activity here. So thank you, Skylar.
Okay, thank you. Very well done. Shall we move to, say, Richard, you want to talk about software again?
Indeed. Thank you, Eric. So the second recommendation that we have coming out of the S&T subcommittee is a little bit different than the first. As Eric mentioned, the NDAA that comes out each year authorizes a number of activities, and this year's NDAA, the 2020 NDAA, has in it Section 862, in which Congress asked the Defense Innovation Board to create an independent assessment of the department's progress on implementing software development, software management, and software training programs. And this is directly related to the SWAP report that Michael and I co-chaired along with Jen and Milo and Gilman and Trey. And it came out last year. And so just the way that's being done is that in Section 862, Congress has asked the Department of Defense, the Secretary, to report back an initial report on what's being done to implement various activities in terms of software development, software management, software training programs, an initial report around now, and then a final report a year after the NDAA was passed in 2020, or the 20 NDAA was passed. And so as part of that initial report and final report, the Defense Innovation Board has been asked to give an independent assessment of the department's activities. And so that will be included in those reports. So as it happens, the department is going to request an extension of the initial report and ask for a little bit more time. And so that probably won't come out for a couple of months, but because of the Federal Advisories Committee Act, we have to publicly deliberate on our comments that will go into that future report now, because this is when our public meeting is. And so to do that, we have collected some data from the people who are working on that initial report in terms of their initial thoughts on where that was going, in addition to some of the materials around that they're basing their kind of implementation activities on. And so this is something where we're seeing the beginnings of the activity. They will report in another few months on what the actual implementation is. We're deliberating now on kind of our sense of all of that and an assessment, and then we'll have we have a short report that we'll need to approve in order for that to go in. So overall, our assessment of the initial activities is positive. The directions are right. It's just starting, and so I think people are pointed in the right direction. As is often, I think, the case with the Defense Innovation Board, we'd love to see things move more quickly toward actual implementation, and so we almost uniformly give the advice of let's get going on this, and in particular to do something that is very consistent with the SWAP report, which is to start small and iterate quickly, and then identify those ways to expand that and scale it and optimize it. And so that's also the case here. We also think that there are opportunities in the context of these initial activities that we've seen started, and I'm being vague about it because they're not publicly available, so I can't say what they are, but we've assessed them. But there are some opportunities in there for the department to partner with Congress towards seeking legislative support for some of the things that they would like to do, in particular in the areas around software expertise within major development and acquisition programs, MDAPs, as well as major information systems. So that's sort of where we're at. The directions are good. We believe that the department should look toward implementing things as quickly as it can. Start small, iterate quickly. We hope to see that when the actual initial report comes out, and that's what we will be looking for when the final report comes out about those implementation activities in terms of really providing the types of training and career paths and other things that are required and that are part of our SWAP report. So with that, I will stop and take any questions, comments from the board regarding things. And Michael, you've been involved with this as well. You may want to throw in your own 2 cents.
Just 2 very quick comments and maybe a question that Richard you can sort of opine back on. So I would just reiterate what Richard said. We've seen very good support in the department for going after the recommendations, and simply repeat that in all cases the mantra is move quickly, do something. If it doesn't work, fix it. Move again, and move quickly. So general reinforcing comment. Richard, I guess the one question is, do you want to make any comments on sort of where we see the issue around sort of tools and capabilities? I mean, this has been an ongoing refrain that we've heard from a long time. So,
yeah, I mean, I think generally looking at how to increase the ability of DoD through both the services and the military, as well as the civilian workforce, as well as contractors, to just have more capability and software available to the Department of Defense, both within actual doing of software, implementing software, getting it out in the field, doing things quickly, but also within acquisition programs, right, the acquisition side of that, and understanding, right, how does modern software work, and figuring out how to get modern software through that contracting process in a way that makes sense. And, you know, again, going back to our SWAP report, software is never done. That was the title of the report. And so you can't sort of think about software as something where you somehow you write a bunch of recommendations, you spend a bunch of time, sort of putting out a competition and deciding, and then you acquire that software and then you sustain it. That's just not the way it works, right? We all know this, just from our daily lives, right? You buy a piece of software and it's constantly getting updated, and it needs to be constantly updated. Software is never done. It's an ongoing process. getting people within the Department of Defense who understand that, getting the capabilities within the Department of Defense so that we can see that type of operation going on, that when a bug or a flaw comes up, a security flaw in particular, that it's not, oh, well, we need another release of the software. Let's start writing what the requirements are, and 10 years from now, we'll have that release that protects against it. That's way too late, right? How do we say, this is an ongoing capability, this is something that needs to be solved soon. How do we get something out on Friday, right? Because it needs to go out that quickly. And again, that requires a different way of thinking about software. We need that capability and expertise within the department in a variety of ways. And so I think, again, on the workforce side, and we had sort of 4 lines of effort, and the 3rd line of effort was really increasing the capabilities within the Department of Defense on the people side. Because software is by people and for people, right? And so we just really need to recognize that.
To pick up on that, Richard, it's not just the number of people attached to this, but I think certainly I would recommend that we strongly emphasize that those people need to be given a plan to make sure that they stay, that there is a qualitative path for them to move forward, because they're going to amass a large amount of information, even though they're going to be a relatively small group in the beginning. And we don't want any, as much as possible, we don't want any significant turnover of that team, because it could set this project back a lot. So I would just recommend that we strongly emphasize that as we're doing all this work for the software side, we make sure that we are pathing and making sure that the support for the people are there that those people will stay for the length of the duration of the project, and then have an ability to train new people to come in after it.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, I'd say that providing people with the right environment so that they can do their job effectively, and then having them say, boy, this is the best place I could imagine being for having the type of impact that I can have as a software developer, I think is something that we absolutely have to do. And I would say we want sort of both, right? That is that we want people who stay in those positions rather than hopping out and going and doing something else.
That's essentially it, making it a career track.
Making it a career track.
And making them understand it's rare to be able to be in the DoD where you can do a job that affects the entire DoD like this could.
Right. And at the same time, allowing people who are in the private sector to come in and spend some time in DoD and help and contribute, and then go back, and they'll still be part of that DoD family, right? But now back in their commercial companies and other things. And so, how do we do both? How do we allow people to have a career path, but also allow people to kind of hop in and out a little bit within the context of the Department of Defense in an effective way?
Very good. Thank you.
So we've had enormously strong support from Secretary Lord, as I said earlier, and the Chief Information Officer and his teams. So that's in pretty good shape. There were a set of changes in procurement that were in flight. The most important one was addressing this question of color of money. Are you reasonably confident that those changes will go through?
I don't know. I'm reasonably confident that anything complicated will go through, but I'm very confident that that is something that Secretary Lord has put very high up on her list of priorities in terms of really thinking, how do we change that acquisition process and have a single color of money? It's a hard lift, right, to get all of the pieces to sort of do that. And so
this is the bureaucracy fighting back against sort of leadership.
Absolutely.
So we want the leadership to win, not the bureaucracy.
Absolutely. And we are strong advocates of that. Again, why is that important? Because when you split things into multiple pots, right, you have it's just not the way software works, right? And to sort of say, oh, no, we can't add, that's a new feature, right? We have to go out and write the requirements for that new feature and rebid, that's just not, sorry, that is not software, right? And so again, that single color money that says software is never done, we need to say we're going to spend $50 million a year, $100 million on this capability that is software enabled forever, right? And we want improvements all the time, right? We want to be rolling out improvements every month, every quarter, every year, whatever it is, depending on the size of that. And so I think getting there is absolutely the right way to go. I have confidence that the leadership within the DoD understands that and would like to move that forward. And there are lots of pieces that need to agree, and I think that conversation is happening.
Are there other?
I want to pick up on a theme of, one of the things we've had a bunch of discussion about is you've got the DoD, which is not a very software-centric organization today. One of the experiences we had when we kind of recovered healthcare.gov, and you kind of touched on it, the notion of rotation. I think the thing we need to target as a first thing is to get the right kernel of software development in all the right places. Because one of the things we noticed is if you can get trusted advisors that do the design correctly, that know when, if a lot of it's outsourced, can know what's good and what's bad, you can actually, it's not as daunting as you think. You get up to this level of software capability in the organization internally, and then you can build from there, and your outcomes become better just from the beginning.
Which kind of kernel were you referring to?
Yeah.
Not that kind of kernel.
Both, perhaps.
Both kinds.
A good kernel would be good, too.
Can we get some comments from folks on the phone?
Or not. All right, well, maybe I'll just pull it back and say, so we have prepared a page and a half, which is, again, on our website, and you can read that we are asking for the board approval to put into the initial response that goes back. I'll also say we're looking for ways to also comment on the final version that comes out, when it comes out, and to augment what we've already done, but we're asking for official approval now on this particular page and a half assessment.
Is there agreement we should, so Colleen, you want to
We'll go ahead and do the vote, yeah? So I'll do the online dial-ins first and then on stage. So Missy?
Yes. Are you looking?
You just need to approve or not?
Do you concur?
Do I have any comments? Is that what you're asking?
No, we're doing the vote right now. Do you concur?
Just the vote. Okay, yes. No, I concur.
Great. Danny?
Are you there, Danny?
Yes, I concur, sorry.
Great, thanks.
Unmute.
Dr. Lander?
Concur.
Marnie?
Concur.
Great. Jen?
Absolutely concur.
Great. Daniela?
I concur.
Thank you. And then Neil?
I concur.
Great. And then those on stage, by show of hands?
Neil,
Great.
you only concurred once.
So that it appears that we have approved that number 2 unanimously. Kurt, so we've been interested in this workforce and behavior stuff for a long time, and now there's a team that you're part of that's really pushing hard on it. So take us through what you want to get done.
Okay.
Give us an update.
So thanks a lot for the intro there. We obviously have talked a lot about workforce issues as part of the transformation of the DoD, both in the software study. There was also a Workforce Now set of recommendations that we looked at in the October meeting and approved at that meeting. But there's another piece that comes from the NDAA again, the Defense Authorization Act. This section is 230. And 230 directs the DoD to promote and maintain digital expertise in software development as a core competency in both the civilian and the military workforce. The first thing I'd say is that we completely support this notion overall. It's consistent with what the Workforce Now recommendations were that were in October. There's an interesting provision in it that we want to talk about here, and it's an optional provision that the Secretary can appoint a civilian official to a new position. The new position is called the Chief Digital Engineering, Recruitment, and Management Officer. A bit of a mouthful of a position, but it's a really cool idea. The DIB supports the notion of the Secretary appointing this position. And the idea is, I'll introduce it and we'll get a sense of what that person might do. But if you think about the workforce personnel divisions, it's very disparate across the organization. It is kind of mired in the past in some cases. We actually had a briefing from the Army's Future Command today, and or the Chief Human Capital Officer. Her name is Katie Kelly, and she talked about the different parts of the organization having very different policies in terms of how they recruit people. It's very complex. It's not coordinated across all those divisions. And so at the same time, digital talent is hugely important. We just talked about it here, the importance of having great software expertise. And so we think that actually appointing this position could be game-changing. It's an opportunity that we actually think that they should take advantage of. We actually like a better name, the Digital People Officer. It's less of a mouthful, so I think that's a good thing. And we think actually, in addition to kind of setting on a better course, we think it has an opportunity to kind of bridge the gap of how do you get started again? How do you get people starting to bring the right talent into the organization? So we think they should really go at this boldly and put this position in place. There's a few things. We actually did a job description, and you can see that in the report. But there's a few things we think you could do. One, they could actually just get started and start figuring out how do we effectively recruit people and what are the right techniques for doing that. Actually just start recruiting people, core software people, digital people. We think it's the most effective way overall to do that. We also think a piece of this is going to be about best practices and how do you kind of bring together a community of the HR officials kind of all over the organization and, develop what's the best approach to do this overall. So we think that's a good opportunity as well. And then the other thing is when you look across the organization and figure out how is it working today, how do you pull it together into a structure that makes sense for the future? So as I said, we pulled together a job description. We also thought a bit about where we should put this. And we think putting it in the DDS makes the most sense. That's the Defense Digital Service. That actually got created as an offshoot of when we had the issues with healthcare.gov. How do you create an organization that's going to kickstart great software development in the different organizations? One got created for the Department of Defense. And so we think that actually has already started by creating an infrastructure by which you can bootstrap. They'll have all their offices there together. They know how to work with the DoD overall. So we think it's probably the best way to get kickstarted really quickly. The other thing I think is important to recognize is that it should use what's going on in the private sector as an example for what we can do in the DoD as well. Every corporation is going through transformation to being a digital organization. And so we've already learned a bunch about what this means, what it means in terms of having the right people to do the job. And so one of the organizations that I lead in Microsoft is called Core Services Engineering and Operations. And we've actually transformed Microsoft from thinking about our internal systems as things that you run to actually thinking of it as things you build using great software development techniques. It means you have to change who you have in the organization, what the career ladders look like. And we wrote it up in the paper, but we'd be happy to talk to the DoD about what that means. We also cited a couple other places like Novartis and PwC who've done a similar transformation. So lots of examples in industry that we can leverage there as well. So overall, we all as part of the workforce, we strongly recommend that they adopt this. And I want to toss it over to Jen. Jen, do you have some comments as well?
I do. Thanks for that setup, Kurt. This is a really important part of the meeting today and an important part of the work that we're trying to do here. I guess I'll start just by commending Congress for the great idea of this position and also echoing Kurt's comments that the Digital People Officer is a little bit of a catchier title and would probably serve the position well in its simplicity. So recommending that the department adopt that name rather than the longer one. I think the rest of the board's with me on that.
Absolutely.
I also just wanted to recognize and assuring that all of you on the DIB understand this, all of us here, that while this is something that is coming from Congress, you can't simply command the system to rapidly fill this digital talent gap. It is obviously more complicated than that. The work that we did in Workforce Now that Kurt referenced revealed that however well-intended the department might be on these issues of filling this gap, there are really a lot of regulations and policies. They're deeply complex, deeply interconnected, and you get kind of mired down. And it's very easy for the work that we recommend to get limited to making change on the margins. This limited incremental change, as we're all, I think, in agreement here, isn't enough right now at this particular moment in time and the issues that face our national defense. It's not fast enough and it's not bold enough. And so what we're recommending here, I think, sort of takes it up a notch. I think Kurt referenced the cyber workforce example, at least it's in the report. That one was driven in large part by federal requirements to stand up a cyber workforce, which have been slower than we'd hoped to come. And as with anything in the federal government, we really appreciate where this individual sits, this hopefully the Digital People Officer, can really make or break their success, how close they are to sort of positions of power. So we're obviously really looking out for where this position will end up being. And as Kurt said, we think the the Defense Digital Service is the right place to put it. I guess I would also just echo Kurt's comments on the important role of hiring processes in what we're recommending here. This DPO would be sort of a repository of knowledge and best practices of hiring around the department, at least hiring for these digital positions. And there has been a lot of study and introspection. Of course, we're looking at what the private sector has done. I'll also add that I think that's happening in lots of places around the public sector. You might note that Google, for instance, has started including peers in their hiring process. That it's not solely managers making hiring decisions. Why did they do something like that? Because they measured it and saw that got better results. You have other practices coming from the public sector. Many people have looked at how places like Symphonies have started following blind hiring auditions as part of their hiring practice. And again, it's because the data shows you get a better workforce because of that. So we really want to emphasize how much the department should be looking at practices from the outside, not just technology considerations. And what we haven't mentioned yet is just the speed of hiring. We are absolutely in an incredibly competitive environment here, and speed will matter. In fact, Colleen was kind enough to forward a comment from the Army Chief of Staff, General McConville. I think this was just yesterday in events. He was quoted as saying, "We are in a war for talent." That's true, and we should act that way, and we should be as aggressive as that language suggests we should be. So just excited to see this brought forward. I really believe this is critical and game-changing opportunity for the department. We can rapidly scale recruitment, development, and retention of digital talent with this particular proposal. So thanks for setting it up, and I'll turn it back over to you, Kurt.
Great, thanks, Jen. So I'm going to toss it over to questions. So there are a few we might want to think about. One thing is the section talks about digital engineering. Do we want to define what that means? And more specifically, that's a question we should probably resolve at some point. There's the whole notion that was talked about as cyber talent acquisition or development versus digital engineering. How do those relate to each other? There's digital transformation overall. How do we think about building the workforce versus the digital transformation effort underway overall? Also, we had some discussion earlier, and it was mentioned here around housing in the DDS. There's the provisions talk about this is a formative stage of, I think it's like up to 2 years, but we can have a discussion around is that like the right place to put it? What's the value there? Would we see it transitioning over a period of time? And any other thoughts people have about additional things we might put in the capabilities. But let me toss it open for discussion.
Maybe I'll just make two comments, just in reverse order. So I very much like this position, and I think it's good to see the impetus from Congress to make this happen. I think the attachment to DDS makes a lot of sense, and don't take my comment as negative anyway, because I think there's a lot of good reason for that. It's maybe just go one step further, that at some point having even more maximum visibility into the Secretary's office. That can be while the person is in DDS or not, but given that this is conceived as a sort of a short term, a year or two before it transitions into something more, and given everything the Defense Innovation Board has been saying for a long time, there is no more important role that has to get done. So we should think a little bit about, how do we make sure that this is maximally visible across the organization?
I think it's a good point. I think the other thing to think about in exactly the same regard is there are lots of personnel divisions already in the DoD that have that function, and I think part of this formative period also has to be how does it relate to all those different organizations, and what does that transformation look like as well? Without
getting buried in those organizations.
Yeah, precisely.
Right? So, and then the only other comment I would make, and just follow on to what you said before, I think we can't look at this as just how do we hire the right people? Because as we have all said all along, hiring the right people without having the right tools, without having the right environment. So if you're going to make a major step move in the digital personnel, you have digital engineering personnel, whatever we want to call them, you have to have an environment where people can actually do the work. And so that means this is highly coupled to the systems and the tools and the capabilities that people have. And we need to be sure that the DPO has as much play in that part of the conversation as anything else.
Yeah, totally agree.
The other thing, Kurt, is that I understand that there may be some similar efforts being undertaken in other agencies, other U.S. government agencies and departments. Once this is established, we should encourage that outreach to see what type of connection, because there is a world beyond the DoD that we should also be understanding and connecting into if we could.
Yeah, and other issues in some of the departments within the DoD around, we had the discussion earlier today around how do you hire for particular positions, what authorities do you have that you might be able to scale?
Yeah, to some extent that this job is going to have similar impact in other agencies as well. It's going to look like the same kind of thing, maybe not to the extent that it is in the DoD in terms of size, but it's going to have similar impact. And some may be further ahead, so we might want to see what mistakes might have been made in organizing that might be avoided and get this going quicker.
So it seems to me that first place, I support this proposal and your analysis of it. It seems to me that we are still whittling around the edges of the bureaucracy, right? So we have the SWAP study, which we're busy getting implemented. We have this proposal. We're trying to get more software talent into the DoD in one form or another through various mechanisms. I don't think it's going to happen fast enough. But at the end of the day, people will say this was a good try, but it wasn't aggressive enough. And I've been trying to think about what is the most aggressive thing that could realistically be done. I'll give you a crazy idea, which is not under the current discussion, but maybe we should discuss at some future point, which is we have roughly 5 service academies. Create a 6th one and call it a cyber academy. When we visited the Air Force Academy, the way it worked is you were appointed. You could go there for the first 2 years, and if you didn't want your commission, you could go somewhere else. But if you chose to finish your degree at the Air Force Academy, you were then signed up for 4 years and the usual rules. And all of a sudden, you'd have a guaranteed pipeline of people who were officers, right, officer-level people, who would be flowing through the intelligence community, the CIA, all the various hiring groups that need these kinds of talents. And if you don't like that idea, because we don't want more than, we've only had 5 and we don't want to add a 6th for the last 100 years, you could create a virtual equivalent of that. It's a sourcing mechanism. But I just don't think that we're going to get enough software people without having them have some more traditional pipeline. So, for example, the military does, in fact, produce excellent software engineers, but it gets confused and it then assigns them to guard duty. Right? So, right? Everyone's doing a software engineer, you've done your guard duty too. I'm sure you wrote software while you were doing guard duty. But there's some sort of confusion around what digital means. And so if we could give these digital people some kind of status, right, that had meaning inside the empire, and also conferred a commitment from them to the DoD. Yeah. So in other words, they can't just quit. Right, so you got your education, you have to work here, you have to work hard, and then after 3 or 4 years, you can go off.
I think it's an interesting idea. I think it's some of the stuff that this digital people officer could kind of think through what might be a good idea. I do have reason to hope. I mean, there are things like the JAKE being stood up that are really super focused on software expertise. I think the DDS is another place. I think we're also seeing particular projects within the DoD that are very software intensive.
But just to be obnoxious, so the problem with this is we're talking about hundreds of incredibly talented people in 3 million person organization, right? I'm just looking for a scale strategy, right? I'm looking for some way to have this be not the exceptional conversation, but the normal conversation. Oh yeah, they're always here. Yeah, we have to deal with them. They're always there. They're always around. There's lots of them. They have incredible value.
I think we should take it away and think it through.
Okay, so think of ways in which you could scale literally the number of such people through traditional mechanisms, hiring processes, promotion processes, changes in the various strange rules that the government has.
The other thing I think is this whole notion of, I mean, at Microsoft, after healthcare, I came back from healthcare.gov, we started a civic leave policy. And that basically said you can leave Microsoft for a period of time and then you can come back. And having more and more of that being something that can be done in the agencies, I think, helps as well, because there are a lot of people who want to help the country.
Yeah, and Eric, I really like your idea. I think one of the big concerns here is continuity. And this type of program, this type of idea, whether or not it's a formal academy or virtually, provides that continuity. But even more so, the type of person we want here is we want an intellectual refresh with the age group that comes in, because there is a difference here. Maybe there isn't a difference in some of the other disciplines that the academies do, but in this area, it does matter. You want to stay as current, and you want to bring along as many people in a continuous form as you can, because that's what this is going to need.
I know it's hard online. Jen, did you have any comments you wanted to add as an author of this paper? Anything to add?
I think that Eric is exactly right, that the scale isn't quite ambitious enough for the needs of the department. I'll also just sort of maybe reframe a little something that I think it was Michael, said as we started the discussion here, which is that it's not just about the recruitment, right? To get hundreds of thousands of great digital people into the department, we're also going to have them land in positions where they can do the job they know they came here to do. And, every time we've talked about every single one of these recommendations or proposals, when we get together, we talk about the need for greater speed and greater scale. And I think that it's really about those things coming together. To have people coming in at a time, if they're coming in larger numbers, when the procurement rules are changing, the tools are changing, the ability for them to succeed when they come in is also changing, is so important to getting them to be effective, to stick, and then to go out and say to other people in their field, the Department of Defense is the biggest place where you can have enormous impact and change the world. So I completely concur, and I want to sort of tie these threads together so that they all add up to greater than the sum of their parts.
Great. Anybody else online?
Well, great. Mr. Chair, I'll go ahead and start the vote.
Let's start.
Great. Missy, do you concur?
I concur.
Thank you. Marnie?
I concur.
Thank you. Jen?
I concur.
Thank you. And then Neil?
I concur.
Excellent. Thank you.
Jen?
I think,
Okay.
yes. Yep. Fantastic. Okay. Oh, and then board members by show of hands here? Great. Thank you. Fantastic. And then with that, Dr. Schmidt, I'm going to go ahead and move.
I think it's your turn.
It absolutely is. Thank you. So I'm going to go ahead and give an update to the board on progress implementing some of your recommendations within DoD. So just to give everyone a little background on this, because they are a federal advisory committee providing advice to senior leaders, they actually have no authority to implement. And so the information is provided here to inform them of actions undertaken by the department relevant to their recommendations. And updates on recommendations are included in all of our meetings. So we will move through these. So recommendation number 5, we've had catalyzing innovation in artificial intelligence and machine learning. As you discussed at the top of the meeting, Dr. Schmidt, the Secretary of Defense approved a set of AI ethical principles based on the DIBS AI ethics principles that will guide the department's adoption of AI. They aim to shape global norms on the development and deployment of the military AI. And the CIO, through the JAIC, will lead implementation of these principles to ensure that DoD AI capabilities are both effective and responsible. We could do the next slide. Recommendation number 10, making computing and bandwidth abundant. In November 2019, the Air Force announced their intention to invest $9 billion in digital and cloud architecture dependent on funding in FY21. This will be part of an effort to create a digital Air Force. The investment is part of a new digital strategy for the Air Force that aims to field a 21st century IT infrastructure, use data for AI to help airmen make better decisions faster, and reform business practices to improve effectiveness and efficiency. Recommendation number 12, forge new approaches to data collection, sharing, and analysis. The Army has taken steps to increase the amount of data it collects and to make better use of that data, both at home and in the field. For example, the Army's AI task force has pushed to process larger amounts of existing data, namely in the areas of talent management and predictive maintenance. The Army also plans to outfit a large number of infantry soldiers with integrated visual augmentation system goggles. This will allow soldiers in the field to act as sensors, building a database of what sensor-readable events happen on the battlefield. Recommendations on refactoring the acquisition code for competitive advantage via the DIBS Software Acquisition and Practices Study. General Hyten, Vice Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, has stated that one of his top priorities will be to re-inject speed into DoD's requirements and acquisition process, especially when it comes to software. His desire to have acquisition specialists write software acquisition requirements at a speed to match evolving cyber threats falls in line with the recommendations in the DIBS SWAP study. The next one, implementing a zero trust architecture across DoD. DoD established a zero trust action group comprised of representatives from the services, DISA, NSA, U.S. Cybercom, DoD CIO, and others to share best practices across ongoing zero trust architecture efforts in the department. The group is also meeting with the commercial sector to better understand commercial best practices. Recommendations on 5G. Last fall, DoD named 4 military bases that would host 5G testing: Naval Base San Diego in California, Joint Base Lewis McChord in Washington, Hill Air Force Base in Utah, and the Marine Corps Logistics Base in Albany, Georgia. DoD is also involved in ongoing discussions with NTIA and Congress to share hundreds of megahertz of spectrum. It has subsequently taken steps to work with industry in that regard. And then last, as we're going forward in our implementation updates, we would like to welcome the public and those in the Department of Defense to tell us your innovation stories. We can go to the next slide, and we'll post this online for you. But we'd like you to send us your stories, and then going forward, we will use those to present at our upcoming public meetings. And with that, that completes our implementation update. So I will now move into public comments. For those who are interested, we have 2 microphones set up here. If you have, I think you filled out public comment cards when you came in. If you could hand those off to some of our staff here, I think they'll raise their hand and sort of pre-position themselves. But we welcome folks to come up and go ahead and make any public comments or remarks you would like for the board's awareness. Don't be shy.
Hi, my name is Rupa Gupta. I'm at Carnegie Mellon University. So I really appreciate the fact that we're creating a position to do digital recruitment. I want to emphasize that we really need to focus on retainment. I've worked a long time with the DoD now, 2.5 years, which is not as long as you guys, but been around. And I'd like to just kind of share a case study. One of my interns last summer, USAFA grad, master's at CMU, amazing practitioner of cybersecurity and machine learning. Worked with us, won some awards, great guy. Went off to cyber school at Biloxi for 6 months, had a time, and now he's promoted first lieutenant and is currently stationed at his first position as an officer. And his techno talents are not being used at all. He's just a manager of enlisted men and women. He's going to be sitting there. He's going to be trying to figure out what to do with his life, and he's going to go through this. He's going to go through all these different steps till he can leave the military and then go to industry and do stuff with his talents. I would really emphasize that we need to focus on retainment. So that's the officer side. Amongst the GS side, we have a lot of amazing people that I've worked with, and one of the issues is that they come to the government because they really want to make a difference. They face issues against bureaucracy, against a lot of mismanagement, and then just frankly, they're not paid well enough as compared to industry. So once they get the experience, they leave. So we do have a war for talent. It's not necessarily against foreign adversaries, it's against our own industry base. So how do we kind of balance that out? How do we not only encourage industry to work with the government, but how do we keep our talented people within the DoD, DOE, wherever? So that's
great. Thank you.
Thank you very much. More comments?
Do we have anyone else?
Hey, good afternoon. I'm Commander David Soul. I work down the road at with the Defense Health Agency as well. My disclaimers, of course, I don't represent my department or the Navy when I speak. So, but I would like to highlight just the opportunity that the board has in front of them to encourage recruitment and retention through just your presence. Up until today, I wasn't aware of the scope of this board and what kind of problems you're solving. So when I hear you speak, you're speaking to the problems that I get angry with during my job. And so to hear you saying, hey, here's a possible solution is very inspiring. Not to mention that you're all leaders in your field and people know who you are, they look up to you. So just knowing you're involved and you want them to go do that work is a recruitment tool. So increasing your exposure in the community and to the active duty community as well really helps with keeping us inspired and motivated. So thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. More comments or questions? Yes, sir.
Yes, my name is Richard Rodriguez. I'm the Director of Partnership Development at the National Security Collaboration Center at UTSA. I'm not sure if you've heard about this center where we're collaborating with many researchers, and recently UTSA in the fall did a cluster hire of artificial intelligence, and so we have faculty research looking for research projects and maybe to aid in a timely result of the scanning. Maybe there might be some opportunity there, but I'd certainly like to speak to any one of you after this about that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, last call.
Anybody online?
Great. Okay, with that, we'll close the public comment period. Dr. Schmidt, board members, I think this was a really exciting meeting with a lot of actionable items that we presented here today that we will take back, and hopefully the department hears us and helps move some of this forward. And I'll sort of turn it over to you.
Thank you. There's a set of things that I'm really proud of. First, I'm obviously, at least speaking for myself, I've had the best time working with my colleagues on the phone and here working on these problems. We have a sense of purpose, we have a sense that it matters, and we have an audience that's listening to us. It's now up to us whether we can actually get these things to happen or not. That's the charge. And I'm particularly, as I mentioned in my opening statement, I'm particularly proud of the ethics work, which we approved, I think, last cycle. And the staff working with the OSD and so forth in a very expeditious way got it supported and in fact issued by the Defense Department, which sets, it's a sort of historical point. It sets something about morality and ethics and AI that is something I want to be associated with, and I know the rest of us do because we all discussed it at great length. It's a good example of this process working. Now, for me, this meeting is a bittersweet meeting because we are in the process of losing our historic first founder, executive director, who's been replaced by an even better version, but we will avoid that for the moment.
Recruited.
That Josh recruited. But Josh Marcuse, when I started, I was introduced to him, and they said, "Oh, he'll be good." And I said, "Okay, well, whatever. How good can he be?" And the answer is he was perfect for the job. His background is in workforce development, in fact, and so he had an unusual approach to trying to get people, and his talent turned out to be building political support within the bureaucracy. So I can rail against the bureaucracy while he can go build political support inside of it, which means, as Josh will tell you, an innumerable number of meetings because the DoD is very, very big. In addition, he used the same techniques that he developed over many years to work with Congress. So one of the reasons why our trajectory over the last 5 years has been so effective is because Josh personally knew not only how to recruit the team that has now brought what you saw today and what we did before, but also understood the politics of this. And in an organization, when you're trying to change the politics, you have to have some inner supporters, you have to have a strategy of internal change, right? And he developed that. And so if you go back to, for example, the JAIC, right, when that was created, That didn't just happen because a general who happens to be incredibly talented decided. It's because there was a great deal of preparatory work. So what I've learned about the DoD is that the DoD works through consensus building among the staffs, and there is no better person that I've worked with than Josh Marcuse. Thank you, Josh, for your 5 years of service. And since this is the public comment period, you see, even the people on the and since this is the public comment, you're not allowed to respond to my praise. Just take it as a genuine gift from us. Colleen?
Excellent. And so I think with that, this meeting is adjourned. I think we have some event over here for folks after, but thank you very much, board members. Thank you, audience members, for participating, and those who were able to watch us on live stream.